one of my last things I want to talk about is our other options and consideration. So we're already having difficult conversations. We're already talking about death and what happens when we're gone. Why not talk about all of it, right? So when we are pre-planning, we know the importance of pre-planning. We've got to do it. We've got to protect those public benefits. We know that a special needs trust may be a very good option for us. We know that a irrevocable prepaid burial policy is an excellent way to plan for the future, but there are some other ways, right? And there are some other things we need to consider when we do this. So I don't talk about it here. I know there are lots and lots of really good workshops on this. ABLE accounts are a great way to plan for our loved ones. That may be either in addition to or as an alternative to a special needs trust. When we talk about life insurances, I know that there are some questions out there on whether a life insurance policy will cover somebody with a disability. I don't fully recommend a life insurance policy, and I know that there's an insurance agent out there somewhere disagreeing with me, and that's okay. I would rather you do an irrevocable prepaid burial policy or a special needs trust or both of those. I think that's going to cover what you're trying to accomplish better than a life insurance policy. And I'm not sure that I can even recommend a life insurance company, though I know that there are some insurance companies that have special needs policies. And if that is something that you're interested in, I would do an internet search on that. So without giving any kind of referral or details, I do know that there are some and that you would need to be fairly specific in your search. The other thing we want to consider is a home. Right? So Johnny lives at home with us now, and it's wonderful. We love having him there. And then what happens? Johnny can't live in that home by himself. He can't own a home. So we probably shouldn't leave him a home, right? Some special needs trusts will own homes. Some will manage those homes and make sure that all of Johnny's needs are met within that home. But that's only if Johnny can live in that home, that home is a good environment for him, because it was great when mom and dad were there, may not be great when mom and dad are gone. Can Johnny afford the taxes? Do you have a way to pay for those taxes? Some special needs trusts will pay for real estate taxes and some won't, because they can count as income for Social Security purposes. Can the trust, if you have a trust, can the trust sustain the cost of the maintenance of a home? What if, unfortunately, Johnny falls and now he can't live in that home? Then what's going to happen to it? Right? So we always need to consider one or two steps further than the immediate. So Johnny lives with us now. When we're gone, he could probably live here with some caregivers. Okay. And then what happens? Right? So think further out, think down the line. How is that all going to play out? Think of lifelong needs, right? Maybe Johnny doesn't have very many needs right now. He is living in a group home. He goes to work every day, and he doesn't need anything other than his eyeglasses and the supports, and he loves what he does. Right. And then Johnny turns 55. He turns 60. He turns 65. And all of a sudden his needs change, right? Everything changes. Now what do we do? Is there money set aside in a special needs trust for durable medical equipment? Is there enough money to pay for a private room if he needs to go to rehab at a skilled facility? Right? So these are things we want to consider. And if you have a really good trustee, they're going to make that trust last for as long as practicable. That is their job as a trustee, is to make sure that trust lasts as long as practicable or for the lifetime of the beneficiary. We don't know how long Johnny's going to live, right? Because we don't know how long we're going to live. What are your family dynamics? Ugh. Right? Everybody's got them. We all got family dynamics. How does that come into play? Right now, you're guardian and conservator for Johnny. Great. He's doing great, living in his ISL, living in his group home, going to work, living his best life, right? Part of all of the decision making, everything is great. But what happens when you're gone? Is Johnny's sister going to take care of him? Is Johnny's sister's husband going to take care of him? Cousin Sue, who's loved Johnny her whole life, but is 70 years old, is she going to take care of him? Maybe you really like sister's husband, but Johnny does not. Right? So all of that needs to come into play. You need to know what your family dynamics are and really think about what that may look like for Johnny. Maybe Johnny doesn't need a guardian or conservator right now, right? He doesn't need one. Supported decision making. Love it. I love supported decision making. Maybe he needs just a little bit of help, and so you're rep payee for Social Security. Okay, who serves as rep payee when you can't anymore? Maybe you are guardian. Maybe you are conservator. Who serves as guardian and conservator when you're gone? Who serves as guardian conservator when they're gone? Right? We always want to think 2 steps out, 2 or 3. We just want to work our way down the line because, again, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know how long any of us are going to be here. That's why we plan now. If nothing else, from our conversation this evening, we know it's important to plan. And it's important to potentially have a special needs trust, and that can be part of our options. And maybe we want to consider an inactive trust because it's pretty low cost. There aren't very many zeros after that one, right? We want to think about an irrevocable prepaid burial policy and how important it is, because that's $10,000 that our family members don't have to pay for that. And while we're thinking about it, we might as well think about everything else. ABLE accounts, home, lifelong needs. The other thing I want you to consider is, if we are thinking about a special needs trust, who is the trustee? Oh, I'm the trustee. I'm the parent. Okay. But when you're gone, who's the trustee? And can that trustee make distributions that won't impact Johnny's benefits? Can that trustee be responsible for keeping accurate records? Can that trustee make distributions that are for the best interest of John? Does that trustee know how to make the best investment decisions, or do they know somebody who can make that for them? Okay, if sister can, great. What happens when sister can no longer do it? Who could be a successor trustee? So when we're making decisions, we're not making decisions for just tomorrow, right? We're making decisions for as long as we can think out. And again, none of this is fun. None of it is easy. All of it is very difficult. And in all of this, We want to consider Johnny, right? We talked real quick about supported decision making. What does that look like? What does Johnny want? And is what Johnny wants the best for him? Yeah, he's like, I want to go to Disney. Okay, how are we going to get to Disney, right? We got to really think about that. He wants to live in his home that he grew up in with you. Okay, but what happens when you can't do that? Right? So we need to have these conversations, because I will tell you the number of times I've talked to family members who said, "Oh yeah, it's all planned out." Oh, nothing was planned out, because I get the phone call on the other end. Nobody knows what anybody's role is. I got a phone call late last week that somebody called and they said, "We've been looking for you for 3 months. We didn't even know my brother had a trust here." Trust really hadn't even been open that long, less than 5 years. Donor had passed. They had no idea. Want to make sure that our goals and our plans for Johnny are at minimum written down and that we've discussed them. Maybe you don't quite have the special needs trust ready. Maybe you aren't ready to talk about a prepaid burial policy. Maybe you're not ready to make the long-term plans. Make a short-term plan. Make something so that you know that what you want for Johnny as his parent, as his loved one, as his family member, you have a little bit of assurance that someone is going to follow that. Now, we learned we can't always trust our family to do what we want them to do, which is why we have a plan in place, which is why we have special needs trust. We have ABLE accounts, we have letters of intent, and we have prepaid burial policies. We have everything we can possibly do to put things in order for John. And we've named the right people. We've thought out as far as we can think out. And that document, that trust document, is going to tell those people what their job is. And that's, as a family, that's as a family member, that's what we can help for. Right? That those funds in that special needs trust and that irrevocable prepaid burial policy and that ABLE account are protected against people who may not have Johnny's best interest at heart. As long as the people who are serving as trustee and serving as a responsible party on the ABLE account are trustworthy. Right? And I've talked quite a bit about choosing the right trustee, choosing the right people to help make those decisions. I did mention about Midwest Special Needs Trust. I never want a sales pitch. I always want to tell you we're an option. This is just a little bit about us. So Midwest Special Needs Trust, like I said, we are 35 years old. We serve as trustee for first party and third party. We are considered a nonprofit. We serve Missouri and all of the surrounding states, and we are a pooled trust organization. If you have a chance to listen to some of our other workshops that I've done for the St. Louis ARC, you can learn more about what a pooled trust organization is. I've been here 13 years. So this is what I do every day, all day. And I love it. I have a deep passion for making sure our loved ones are planned for, whether that be through a special needs trust, an irrevocable prepaid burial policy, whether an ABLE account is incorporated in that, or whether you're going to an attorney and you're doing special needs planning there. I think that's wonderful, as long as you have a plan. Midwest Special Needs Trust has that low cost option of an inactive $200. And then you don't have to worry anymore. That piece is taken care of, right? At a very low cost option, a very cost effective option, to know that one, it's a properly drafted, so our trust documents have been approved by Social Security and required by law to be exempt from Medicaid, that it is administered because we have our own laws to follow, plus the federal laws to follow, and our trust document. So you don't have to worry about public benefits being impacted when you have MS&T as trustee. You do have to worry about you do have to worry or choose necessarily who you would want as co-trustee, who you would want to help MS&T administer the trust for Johnny, right? But you don't have to worry about, does the trustee know what they're doing? Does the trustee, are they going to make good distributions? What about investments? All of that's taken care of when you use MS&T services. There's no cost to give us a call. So here's our phone number, and everything we do is by phone, email. We can also do Zoom calls or anything like that. So if you heard me tonight and you're thinking, oh, she said something, but I can't remember what it is, and the PowerPoint's not answering your question, feel free to give us a call.
All right, we do have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say I name Johnny's sibling as the successor on the trust.
Mhm.
What if they pass before Johnny?
Oh, yeah. So you are going to want to figure out who your successor after that. So our documents allow for 4 people to be named. You have one serving now, one serving when they're done, one serving after that, and one serving after that. If you're going down 4, you've probably covered as many as you need to. And if that 4th person is saying, "Oh, I don't really want that job," then it's their job as trustee to do something. So yeah, it happens.
Is the irrevocable prepaid burial policy just a pot of money for that purpose without identifying a specific funeral home? Or should we be specifying
You
funeral
have to
home?
use a specific funeral home, but they're purchased through insurance companies. So, like I said, there is some kind of non-transferable, but really it's like non-transferable between people. I've not had a funeral home here in Columbia say they weren't going to um, use those funds because the beneficiary passed away in Rolla, right? So it's kind of transferable between funeral homes as I understand it and have seen it work. Um, but you do have to use a specific funeral home to start. On top of that, I will say that typically burial costs, so like the actual opening, closing, gravesite, headstone, those are typically separate costs outside of the funeral policy, outside of the burial policy. So, and you may have to purchase that through the cemetery. And some of them even have like deeds because you're buying a technical piece of land. So it can get kind of complicated, but knowing that it's all paid for and working through those steps to do that is so important.
This one is asking about, where does this inactive trust actually live? Is this going to be a document that we can have at home in our safe, or is it going to be at someone else's office? Because we want to make sure that maybe the eldest child knows where their siblings' inactive trust is to, let's say, activate it.
Right. Absolutely. Great question. Currently, so if we're going to use, we'll use MS&T because that's what I know, right? So we're going to fill out the paperwork. $200 is going to get deposited into our bank. That's it, right? You've now have an inactive trust. That paperwork is going to sit in a file cabinet literally behind me, and I'm going to hold it until the insurance company says, "Okay, see, I got a check for Johnny. It's his turn to be open now." You will get a copy of that. You may even hear from us on a semi-regular basis where we're calling and double checking, making sure all the information is accurate, making sure all of your paperwork is filled out that you want to have filled out. So it lives in a drawer behind me. And then we also want it to live with you, right? We want you to have a copy so that you aren't that family that had to find me for 3 months and figure out where I was. So yes, yeah, it essentially lives in a file drawer.
Okay. Great, good clarification on
Yeah.
that. Um, this is kind of like their situation.
Okay.
It's a hypothetical, maybe, not sure, but in regards to a question that was asked earlier about purchasing a policy in St. Louis and moving. So we'll say, for example, they might move to California after that prepaid burial policy is in place and paid for. Can they include transportation of the body in that?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. I had a gentleman several years ago who had purchased a plot in Ohio, I believe, except he had moved here. So he did purchase enough of a funeral policy, an irrevocable policy here that included um, a plane ticket to fly him to Ohio to the next funeral home. So those costs can absolutely be incorporated.
So I know we've been talking a lot about these special needs trusts in regards to individuals that have IDD.
Mhm.
Are we able to use special needs trusts for somebody with mental illness?
Oh, absolutely. Any disability. So physical disability, mental health conditions, and IDD and traumatic brain injury, all disabilities. There's no rules regarding what kind.
Well, those are all of our questions. Did you have
Oh,
any final remarks that you wanted to
no.
touch base on?
I want to thank everybody again. I know that this wasn't always the easiest conversation again, and that I'm going to force you to make some hard decisions and have some difficult conversations over the holiday season. But just thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to send an email, give us a call. We're happy to talk anytime.